the New Age concepts kind of combat the objective reality, I guess, that we're living right now, in terms of
yes,
maybe standing for bliss and falling intuition and kind of trying to tap into this.
yeah. Well, a big part of the New Age movement is in fact a reaction against rationalist nihilism. So, and to that degree, there's some utility in it. But the problem is that it's sort of like Protestantism without the devil. The world is all good. Well, no. Wrong. That's not even close to right. The world is a horrible place, and people are terrible creatures. But that's not the whole story, right? Because the world is also a wonderful place, and people are amazing creatures. So, but I think that's another answer to the ideology question too, is that in my understanding, a philosophy that unites the opposites, which is kind of a Jungian idea, is not an ideology. So here's an ideology. Human beings are despoiling the planet. Western culture does nothing but rape and pillage, and nature is a innocent, virginal victim. It's like, yeah, that's all true. But it's only half true, because human beings are all also unbelievably interesting and remarkable creatures, and it's no bloody wonder that we're trying to survive, and that has costs. And thank God for culture, because otherwise, you know, it was -10 last night, so we'd all be popsicles. And nature is doing everything it possibly can at every moment to destroy and undermine us. So it's like, okay, you want an ideology, you can pick the first one, that's an environmental ideology. The second one is like a frontier myth. So you put them together and you've got nature is terrible and beautiful, and culture is tyrannical and provides security, and the human being is, you know, a remarkable exploratory hero and an absolutely satanic figure. And then you've got the whole thing. Not quite, because there's one other category that is sort of like the category from which all those categories emerge. It's a very low-level category. But as far as I can tell, a system that has representations of those classes of phenomena is not an ideology. And I also think that's partly why it's so damn hard to get rid of Freud. Because Freud's categories map onto that map. You know, there's the id, that's sort of nature, and it's great, source of energy, and it's horrible. And then there's the ego, and you know, the ego is, you know, pretty good thing with all sorts of weird troubles and pathologies. And then there's the superego, which is society. You need that, otherwise you're out of control. But it can also be a crushing and tyrannical force. It's like, well, you can't get rid of Freud because he got the story right. And you might argue about his categories and all that, but it doesn't really matter, because they're grounded in something deeper than the terms that Freud used. So, and if you see, Christ, any Disney movie that's worth its salt has all of those characters in it. Otherwise it gets one-sided, like Frozen, which was an absolutely dismal and wretched movie. It was mythology. It was. Disney's pretty good at mythology, but Frozen was pure ideology. So it was very annoying to see that, because in most situations, the Disney movies are pretty good at balancing out the archetypes. So, and that's part of the reason they're so insanely popular. You know, they present an archetypal picture of the world. And the thing is, you say, well, you know, I don't have any religious beliefs. You might say that to yourself. It's like, fine, why do you watch Disney movies? What the hell do you think you're doing in the theater? You don't think that's a religious experience? It's just because you're completely clueless about what religious experiences are. You're watching a bunch of pictures. Like, they're drawings. You know, they're of things that aren't even real. And then you're just in there, like, embedded in there. It's got your imagination. So you say, well, I don't believe in any of that. It's like, yeah, right. Son, come on. You believe in it. Basically, yes. But there's a problem underneath that that's even a bit deeper. Because, like, I think the dominance hierarchy is real. Period. Real. But it's not, it's a weird structure, because it's like, you know, it's like the example I gave earlier, where there's the tunnel and the train going through it, and the train keeps, at any moment, the train cars are full of different things. Well, the dominance hierarchy is kind of like that. It's actually a dissipative structure. So a dissipative structure is like a, you know, when you let the water go out of a drain, and you get that coil, that funnel? Well, is that a thing? Well, it's a constant across a series of transformations. It's a dissipative structure. And the physicist Schrodinger regarded people as dissipative structures. So, because our structure isn't constant, like, I don't know, you've probably replaced every cell in your body, roughly speaking, or at least the constituent elements of every cell, you know, 2 or 3 times since you've been alive. But there you are. So you're like this thing that's a permanent structure in a flux. And the dominance hierarchy is sort of like that. Because the constituent elements of it keep changing. But its existence is there. And so I don't exactly know what to make of a category like that, except that I'm certainly going to say that it's real. Or if you don't like that, I can say, I don't care if it's real because all of you act as if there's nothing that's more real than that. So that'll do for me, because, you know, that brings up another question. How do you know what someone regards as real? And one answer is, well, you listen to what they say. It's like, no, you watch what they do. That's a much more accurate guide to who they are. Because what do they know about who they are? They got a vague model of who they are, and it's usually hyper-tilted towards banality and conformity and self-protection and deceit and all sorts of things.
The metaphor used by Jesus is the wind. You can't see the wind, but you can see the consequences. You can't even see the hurricane, but you can see the catastrophe that follows.
Well, that's like a hurricane is a dissipative structure, so that, you know, that's a reasonable analogy. And the spirit is often likened to the wind. So any other questions? Yes. Yeah. Oh, it's an appalling ideology because the people who created it had the idea about what it should be before they made it. So it's propaganda. You can say exactly what Frozen is about. So it's propaganda. A truly mythologically based story, you can never fully say what it's about. You can just talk about it forever and ever and ever and ever. So it's a wellspring of meaning. So. Oh, sure they are. Of course that's what they're doing. Oh yeah, it's calculated marketing. Yeah. Yeah, sure. It was hyper politically correct. Yeah. And they didn't need men, and, you know, God, give me a break. You know. Just because you need men doesn't mean you have to like them. Yeah, so I mean, I've thought a lot about the difference between propaganda and art. So art's actually a process rather than an end product. And with any luck, if you have a piece of art, the process is embedded in the byproduct. And so it reflects the process when you bring it into your house. And so it's an active, it's a crystallized act of exploration. And the real artist doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. They're exploring. I can recommend a film. There's a film made of Picasso in about 1957. And it was a black and white film. And it was actually a film of him making a painting. And he painted it on glass so you could see what he was doing. It's really quite fascinating because you can see that he's playing. He sketches it in and then he rubs it out. So then he sketches it in again and he rubs it out and he sketches over here. And it's like there's a real dynamism about it. He doesn't plan it out to begin with. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that as an artistic endeavor too. But Picasso was trying to explore and understand. And, you know, I don't know what you know about Cubism, but Cubism, it's a strange thing. But what he was doing with his Cubism was to try to show you that you only see things from one perspective, but that things exist in multiple perspectives. So, you know, a Cubist painting is your face this way and your face this way at the same time. And so you could say, well, is that a more accurate way of representing a person than just the standard portrait? And Picasso would say, well, in some ways, definitely, because it captures the transformative element rather than the static element. And so someone who's a true artist doesn't have a political message. It's funny because my house is full of ideological propaganda from the Soviet Union. It's just packed full of it. And it's so interesting to watch these artifacts because a lot of them they're socialist realist, although mostly they're impressionist, really. It's so interesting to watch them because in the painting themselves, there's a war that you can perceive. And the war is, a lot of the people who made these paintings were incredibly talented, really, really skilled, because the Russians kept their formal academies open. So the Russians can really paint Impressionism. It's remarkable. But their talents were encapsulated within this, but mostly Stalinist ideology. And so in each canvas, there's this war between the ideological message and the artistic message. And what's so cool is, the farther we get away from the Soviet Union, the more the art wins. Because in 300 years, there isn't going to be a shred left of that ideology. And all that'll be left of the paintings is the art. So, part of the reason that people are so attracted to art is because the artist actually manifests identity with the process of transformation. And so that's why the artist is a cultural hero. That's also why every nihilist worth his salt wants to be an artist. Like, who are you? What are you going to say? I'm a nihilist? No, I'm an artist. It's like, no, you're not, but I can see why you want to be. Right, right. Yeah, just because you're a failure doesn't mean you're an artist.
Do you find that the struggle between the artist and the state, it makes the work more interesting, or is the art exciting and interesting in spite of the dynamics?
Well, I think it depends on who you are. Like, it's really interesting to me, but I'm really interested in that. You know, and I'm also interested in the way that ideologies co-opt more fundamental processes to and harness their energy as a rational and motivating force. And so, for me, these pieces of art, propaganda, are extremely interesting. I mean, it's very interesting to be surrounded by them because I can see this war going on all the time. So, it's very cool. And the art's winning, as far as I can tell. So that's very interesting. Because they were pure propaganda, many of them, when I bought them. But it's getting farther and farther away from the Soviet Union. So the more archetypal elements are coming to the forefront. So,
I suppose the question was, would it become less interesting once it's, does that narrative come to close?
I think it would depend on the skill of the artist. You know, and some of these artists are incredibly skilled. So, to the degree that there's genuine artistic merit in the painting, regardless of its constraint, that can manifest itself as value. So, yeah. So, any other questions? Okay, so, well, you basically know where we're headed, so I'm going to start telling you stories.